right now, I mean, you literally have the exact same world leaders fighting on two completely different battlefields.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it's wild. On one front, you have them arguing over like an AI-generated meme of a president dressed as Jesus.
Right.
And then on the other front, they are deploying actual naval warships to sweep for high explosive sea mines in international waters. So today we're doing a deep dive into a recent CBS White House report to really try and untangle this.
Yeah, because it's giving everyone ideological whiplash, frankly.
Totally. We want to figure out how modern diplomacy even survives when you have the absurd and the existential just colliding like this. We've got digital meme controversies and literal geopolitical brinkmanship happening at the exact same time.
Of the exact same players, too.
Exactly. So we have this bizarre social media backlash over an AI image of President Trump, right?
Mm.
And then simultaneously, this intense physical reality of naval blockades and just broken nuclear negotiations with Iran.
Yeah, and before we really get into the gears of how this works, I do want to establish some ground rules for today's deep dive.
Good idea.
Because the sources we're looking at, they deal with highly polarizing, very politically charged figures. We're talking about the President of the United States, Pope Leo, the President of Iran.
Right.
So I want to be really clear to you listening, we are not here to play referee. We're not taking sides or, endorsing any of this political rhetoric.
No.
Our sole focus is just to unpack the facts and the statements exactly as CBS reported them. That way, you can understand the underlying mechanics of this specific geopolitical moment.
I think that framework is super important, especially when we start looking at the first half of this report, because it's almost entirely focused on digital optics.
Yeah, it really is.
So let's look at the sequence of events here. Following some public criticism that President Trump directed at Pope Leo, the president posted an AI-generated image online.
Right, the Jesus image.
Right. It seemingly depicted himself as Jesus, with his hand resting on a man's head. And almost immediately, conservative activists in the U.S. started expressing all this confusion.
Yeah, some were openly calling the AI image blasphemous.
Exactly. And Pope Leo's response to all this was pretty interesting.
It was. He explicitly stated he doesn't want to debate the president. He said he's just going to continue to focus his platform on promoting peace.
Which is, I mean, a calculated move of disengagement.
Oh, entirely. He's trying to just suck the oxygen out of that digital fire. But the fascinating turn, and this is where it gets crazy, is what happened internationally.
Yes. The president of Iran officially weighed in.
Yeah.
He posted this formal statement on social media condemning the insult to the Pope and declaring that disrespect towards Jesus is just entirely unacceptable. And I have to pause here.
Sure.
Because I'm genuinely stuck on why Iran's leadership cares about this.
Yeah.
Like a glitch in the political matrix or something.
Yeah.
We have conservative U.S. activists and the president of Iran arriving at the exact same talking point regarding an AI image.
Right. They're completely aligned on it.
How often does social media create these utterly bizarre geopolitical bedfellows? Is this genuine religious solidarity, or is there some completely different game being played here?
What's fascinating here is that it's a masterclass in low-cost geopolitical leverage.
Okay, how so?
Well, in international diplomacy, whenever your adversary does something that creates domestic friction.
Like upsetting conservative voters over a religious image.
Exactly. Upsetting that specific subset of voters. The cheapest, most effective move you can make is to just amplify that friction.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because by defending Jesus, who is a highly revered prophet in Islam, the Iranian president does three things at once. First, he claims a moral high ground on the global stage.
Right.
Second, he aligns himself rhetorically with his adversary's own domestic critics.
That's wild.
And third, it costs him absolutely nothing, just the time it takes to hit post.
So it's basically a zero-risk way to poke at an internal division within the U.S. He's just weaponizing the internet's reaction.
Precisely. You have this purely digital creation, right? An AI image that requires zero physical resources to make.
Yeah, literally nothing.
And it instantly triggers international statements. It really shows you how fast digital optics can cross borders now. It completely changes how world leaders communicate or refuse to communicate.
But, a digital victory doesn't actually feed your population.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't protect your borders.
Mm.
The Iranian president might have scored a free rhetorical point online, but out in the physical world, free victories just don't exist.
It's exactly right.
Which really brings us to the second half of the CBS report. Because things shift so dramatically here, we go straight from social media feeds to the Strait of Hormuz.
A very different battlefield.
Yeah. The report outlines that the U.S. has initiated a blockade on Iranian ports, and their absolute goal is to completely stop Iran from selling its oil.
And the tactics the U.S. is deploying to achieve that are highly kinetic. We're talking about naval assets physically intervening in global shipping lanes.
Right.
The U.S. is actively hunting down to interdict vessels in international waters that have paid tolls to Iran.
Wow.
And on top of that, they've begun military operations to sweep for sea mines allegedly laid by Iran in the strait.
See, I'm really hung up on this tactic.
Yeah.
We are actively sweeping for live explosives in the water and intercepting massive international cargo ships.
Yeah.
And we're calling this a pathway to negotiation. That feels completely contradictory. It's like locking the doors of a burning house to force a conversation.
That's a good way to put it.
How does pushing a situation to the absolute brink of military conflict motivate anyone to sit down in a conference room?
To understand that, you have to look at the mechanism of maximum pressure.
Okay.
Because the true mechanism here isn't just military might, it's economic strangulation, specifically via maritime insurance.
Wait, insurance.
Yeah. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical geographical choke points for the global oil trade. So the U.S. strategy relies heavily on the concept of asymmetric warfare.
Break that down for me, because when I hear asymmetric warfare, I usually think of a smaller force fighting a larger one, right?
Usually, yes. But in this context, it's about the disproportionate impact of a threat. Think about a sea mine.
Okay.
It's a relatively cheap piece of hardware. But a sea mine doesn't just sink a ship, it violently spikes global maritime insurance premiums.
Oh, I see.
If an insurance syndicate in London decides, hey, the risk of an oil tanker hitting a mine is too high.
They just refuse to cover the vessel.
Exactly. They refuse to cover any vessels passing through the strait. And if ships aren't insured, they don't sail.
Right.
And if they don't sail, the oil trade completely halts without a single U.S. or Iranian missile actually being fired at a fleet.
That is wild. So a relatively cheap explosive in the water basically neutralizes billions of dollars in global trade just by spooking the insurance accountants.
That is the exact leverage Iran holds, and the U.S. maximum pressure campaign is designed to strip that leverage away.
By sweeping the mines.
By neutralizing the physical threat of the mines and physically stopping the toll collections, the U.S. is attempting to cut off the lifeblood of Iran's economy with hard power.
Trying to force a diplomatic outcome.
Right. The overarching theory is that overwhelming economic and physical pressure leaves the opposing side with literally no alternative but to concede.
Which CBS highlighted with a quote from President Trump, actually.
Yeah, what did he say?
He said, quote, "I think Iran is in very bad shape. I think they're very desperate.
Right.
But the thing is, that desperation didn't translate into a deal."
No, it definitely did not.
Over the weekend, the negotiations between the two sides broke down completely. And this wasn't just like a quick 20-minute walkout. The talks lasted for an exhausting 21 hours.
With absolutely no breakthrough.
Nothing. And following that failure, President Trump told reporters he doesn't even care if Iran comes back to the table. He firmly declared, quote, "Iran will not have a nuclear weapon," while acknowledging that they clearly still want one.
Which is a huge statement.
Yeah.
Look, when a high-stakes negotiation goes for 21 hours and yields nothing, you really have to look at the anatomy of the demands on the table.
Yeah. CBS News identified 3 massive U.S. sticking points that caused this gridlock, and the demands were absolute.
Let's hear them.
Number 1, Iran must give up its uranium stockpiles and its ability to enrich uranium. Number 2, Iran must end its funding for terrorist proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah. And number 3, the Strait of Hormuz must be fully reopened.
Yeah, combining those 3 demands into one negotiation is, it's like asking someone to hand over their wallet, the keys to their house, and their life insurance policy all at once.
Right. There is no incremental compromise there. It is an all-or-nothing surrender.
Which perfectly explains the stalemate. Let's look at the mechanics of why giving up those 3 things is virtually impossible for a nation-state to do in a single sitting.
Let's start with the proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah.
Okay, so for Iran, funding these groups isn't just about regional chaos. It provides the state with plausible deniability.
Meaning they can project power without leaving their own fingerprints on the weapon.
Exactly. It's a highly effective asymmetrical foreign policy tool. It allows Iran to strike at adversaries or, create regional leverage without triggering a direct conventional war.
Which they would likely lose against a superpower like the U.S.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
So demanding a country dismantle its primary method of regional defense and influence overnight, That's demanding they strip themselves of their geopolitical shield.
That makes sense. And what about the uranium enrichment? Because you and I know that the leap from civilian nuclear energy to weapons-grade uranium is essentially just a matter of percentages in centrifuge time.
Right.
So why is the demand to stop enrichment entirely such an immovable roadblock?
Because politically, giving up the capability to enrich isn't just about giving up a potential weapon. To the Iranian leadership, it is a public surrender of their scientific sovereignty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's acknowledging that an outside power has the right to dictate their domestic energy program, and that touches on national pride and sovereign rights.
Which are historically the hardest things to negotiate away.
Exactly. Combine that with the demand to surrender their control over the Strait of Hormuz, which is their greatest economic weapon, and neither side has left themselves a ladder to climb down from their positions.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting to me, though. Thinking about game theory.
Okay.
If the demands are that absolute, and both sides know the other cannot concede without looking utterly defeated, why stay in the room for 21 hours?
That's a great question.
I mean, it's like running an ultra marathon and everyone just walks off the track at mile 50. Why not walk out after an hour when it's clear no one is budging? Was there ever a chance of a breakthrough, or was this just a scaring contest?
It serves a massive purpose, but the target audience isn't the person sitting across the negotiating table.
Who is it then?
The target audience is the global community, domestic voters, and critically, third-party mediators.
Oh, I see.
Staying in the room for 21 hours signals that you are doing everything humanly possible to exhaust diplomacy before turning to conflict.
So it's about the optics of trying.
Yes. It allows both sides to walk out and tell their respective audiences, we tried, we stayed up all night, but the other side was completely unreasonable.
So it's diplomatic theater, but with the highest possible stakes.
Exactly.
Which really shifts the spotlight entirely onto those third-party mediators you mentioned. Because the CBS report notes that Pakistani sources are reporting an intense push to get both parties back to the table to hold a ceasefire.
And that makes total sense. When two primary actors are locked in a room, completely unable to compromise on existential issues, direct negotiation often becomes toxic.
Yeah, clearly.
So you have to rely on regional neighbors, like Pakistan. And the thing is, they aren't trying to solve the uranium issue.
Or the proxy issue.
Right. They are just trying to construct a temporary fragile bridge to stop an immediate military escalation.
Because, as you said earlier, when a 21-hour negotiation stalls over sea mines and nuclear stockpiles, the fallout doesn't just stay in a closed room.
No, the ripple effects are huge.
Right. That breakdown dictates global oil prices. It dictates the maritime insurance rates on global shipping lanes tomorrow morning.
Right.
And obviously the overarching threat of nuclear proliferation.
Right. The stakes literally could not be higher.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we're really looking at this intense duality from the source material. You've got a world where a president is dealing with domestic outcry over an AI image of himself as Jesus, while at the exact same time orchestrating international naval mine-sweeping and 21-hour nuclear standoffs.
It's dizzying. But to be truly well-informed today, you have to be able to hold both the absurd and the existential in your head at the exact same time.
You really do.
You have to recognize how quickly leaders can pivot from weaponizing internet controversies to, blockading global trade routes. The digital provocations and the hard power blockades that aren't separate domains.
They're completely linked.
Yeah, they're interconnected levers being pulled by the exact same actors.
So before we sign off, I want to leave you listening with a final provocative thought. And this is drawn strictly from those Pakistani sources mentioned at the very end of the report.
Okay.
The stated ultimate goal of these mediators is to achieve a, quote, prolonged peace after the ceasefire technically ends on paper.
On paper. Man, that is a very revealing choice of words.
It really makes you wonder about the actual nature of these international agreements. In a world of sea mines, interdicted ships, and these stalled 21-hour negotiations, what exactly happens when a ceasefire only exists on paper?
That's the million-dollar question.
Does a paper agreement even matter if the physical waters are still treated as a battlefield? It's something to mull over until our next deep dive. Thanks for listening.